All right.
Today we have a special guest with us. We have Dr. Deidra Morrison Wells. She was born in Texas. She's lived all over. She has a special affinity for Atlanta, but she's now currently residing in South Carolina. Currently, she is a technical research and development consultant, but she's had a ton of positions everywhere from being an assistant professor at Claflin, postdoc and research professor at Clemson, to assistant professor at Morris College. She's been all over. In terms of her education, she received her Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from Spelman College, her Master's and Ph.D. in Computer Science as well from Northwestern University. The research areas that she's focused on in the past 12 years are human centered computing, social computing, public health, software development, user design, and cybersecurity. She specifically focuses on social computing to include examinations of relationship maintenance strategies through digital technologies and abnormal behavior detection in digital spaces. That's a lot of words. In the past, she has interned at IBM Almaden Research Lab, and she's also a Lego maniac. And I've seen these Legos. It is
Yes.
the truth. So, welcome, Dr. Deidra.
Thank
So good to
you.
have
I'm
you.
glad to be here. Now y'all know
Awesome,
I'm gonna be
awesome.
talking, so y'all can go ahead and get it out the way. I'm excited.
So, I mean, this is the podcast to do the talking. So
Yes.
we are happy that you are here.
So,
So one thing that we generally try to start with is just, what influenced you to go into this area? Like when you were young, did you see yourself being a computer scientist or being in this position?
I have had a very non-traditional path to computing. And initially, as a child, I'm a creative. It's a thing that I like the term creative. I'm glad that someone figured it out because I feel like it very accurately describes kind of my raison d'etre or whatever. And so as a child, I really actually wanted to be an artist, right? I wanted to, draw. I drew a lot. Painted, that kind of stuff. I was okay. And then I kind of came to the realization that artists starve, right? So I had a conversation with the mom and it's like, well, no, I like things. So art became something that was more of a hobby and less of kind of an actual job option. And so I was always a kind of smart kid. And so I thought, yeah, I could probably be a doctor, right? So my mom actually had a couple of medical issues as when I was younger that kind of motivated me to be like, I want to be a doctor. I wanted to be an OB, as a matter of fact, right? I wanted to go in to be an OBGYN. And then I realized I was like, you know what? It's a lot of school. And I'm not crazy about blood. But I figured, you know what? I can probably figure it out, right? So most of my childhood, that was what I wanted to do, right? I was like, oh yeah, I want to be a physician. And I remember being like, I think maybe like 12. I was like 12 years old. And that was a long time ago for those of y'all that are listening to this. That was a little while ago. I was 12 and my mom got our first computer. So it was one of those like MS DOS things, like somebody from her job. My mother was in the Air Force, and so she was an active duty military member. And she got this old computer. She mostly got it so she could do word processing because she was in administrative capacity and in the military. And so she got this computer, but somebody thought, oh, well, you got kids. And they gave her the big floppy disk. I don't know how many of y'all remember the big 5-inch floppy disk. And it had Wheel of Fortune on it. Oh my God. And so we got this computer and we had one floppy disk and she was like, here's this game, right? And I was like, oh my God, like what the heck, right? I'm like, this is Wheel of Fortune and it's on the computer. And my mom had to like literally keep me from being on the computer all day playing Wheel of Fortune, 8-bit Wheel of Fortune on this little like old school computer, right? And so my brother had like consoles and stuff, right? He had all the little gaming consoles and stuff. So I wasn't unfamiliar, but I guess the difference in the modality to me was fascinating, right? And so I was just kind of like, I became obsessed with just kind of computers in general, like, and not necessarily like wanting to build computers or wanting to do programming, but just more so using computers, right? And so, we transitioned, and at that point we lived in Japan actually. So we were actually in Okinawa in Japan. And so we were a little late to everything. So, fun fact, when you live overseas, you don't always get, now it's probably different, right? But back then, this was in like what, the early, like, no, this was like the early 90s, right? So you were late on everything. And so we get back to the States, and I'm in high school at this point, and we get a newer computer, right? So we get a newer computer, and the internet is now a thing, right? So Al Gore has given the United States the internet, right? And so so we get dial up, right? Again, I don't want to lose y'all youngins, but we get dial up. So we get AOL online, and so now we got a newer computer, and now we got dial up, right? And so as my interest in computers and using computers continue to evolve, I was, and I remember this, I'll never forget it. I was watching Good Morning America or something, right? And they were talking about careers. And they were like, the top career that year was, the top paying career that year was garbage man, followed by computer programmer. Oh, yeah. That was after all those strikes and stuff.
I mean, garbage collection. Garbage collection, but don't.
Right. Look, listen, it's good if you can do it. I can, but yeah, so computer programmer was like the second highest paid job. And I was like, wait, a computer programmer. And I guess that was when it clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is an actual profession, right? People that actually write the software that I use all the time, right? And I'm obsessed with. And so that was when I made the decision. I was like, no, I think I want to do this, right? I'm like, I love computers. I need to learn how to use computers. I need to learn how to develop things and, be able to program or whatever it was. And I didn't know what it was. I really didn't. Right. But I knew that I wanted to be a part of whatever it was going to be, right? Or whatever it was. And so I made the decision. I was just like, well, forget med school and all that stuff. I'm going to be a computer programmer. And so,
I love it.
Right. And so I started to kind of try and figure out, okay, how do you get a path to being a computer programmer? And we happened to have some friends also that lived in our neighborhood when we were in high school, and their grandfather, because we were in California at this point. So we went from Japan to California, and their grandfather worked for Hewlett Packard. And so he would bring them computers, and they were kind of self-taught. And so one of the siblings of these two brothers was always getting in trouble because he was hacking into the actual networks on the base. I hope nobody, I'm not going to say no names, and it's a good thing I don't remember because, hopefully those dudes are living productive lives, right? But yeah, no, that kid was
at Schmulett Schmackard.
Oh my goodness. He was always getting in trouble because I was just like, he had learned how to start hacking or whatever. And so
he was too smart.
He was too smart. Too smart. And so I remember starting to bug them like, okay, how do you do this? How do you get into this? And da 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 da. And so they were like, well, I mean, we just kind of figure stuff out, and our grandfather helps us with stuff, and we just we take the books that he gives us and da 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 da. And it still felt there was still this wall, right? There was still kind of this place where it was like they had some information, but they didn't really know, right? But I was still determined. I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do this. It doesn't matter. I had already had my heart set on Spelman College, so shout out to Spelman. And I knew that they had.
Did you know? Yeah.
Oh my goodness! So I just recently told this story. So, because I got interviewed for somebody that was doing an article on HBCUs, right? And so they were like, did you think Hillman was a real school? Of course, I thought Hillman was a real school. I think everybody that watched Different World when they were a little kid thought.
My mom still does.
Thought Hillman was a real school, right? And
she told me our neighbor was going to Hillman. I was like, Mom, that's not a school.
Listen.
She meant Spelman, but.
Right, exactly, right? And so I had to do a paper on a college in middle school. And so I came home all excited, and I told my mom, I'm going to do a paper on Hillman. My mom was like, that's not a real school, honey. It's not a real school. And she was like, it's based on real schools, right? So there's a school that's got guys, and there's a school that's got girls, and so I was like, well, okay, well, let me go and find out what's going on. And so I found out about Spelman. And so I fell in love with the whole idea, right? I was being a military kid. We didn't live a lot of places where people look like us, right? We didn't live, and we didn't go to schools. So, I know a lot of people that I know that are Black have had a Black educational experience where they were surrounded by other Black people, right? That's mostly how, most of the folks in our community have lived their lives. And so that was just, we were different, right? And so I just craved it, right? I needed a place where I felt comfortable being Black, right? And so I was like, oh, I can be Black. I can be surrounded by other women. I can, be somewhere where I can be comfortable and really just, enjoy like the Black college experience. And so I was just kind of dead set on it. So yeah, like that was how it started. And I was just like, I knew I wanted to go to Spelman. And then once I decided I wanted to do computer science, I was like, oh God, I hope they have a computer science program, right? Because I was already set on Spelman before I was set on computer science. So they did. Thank God they did. So yeah, I mean, I basically had decided I'm going to go to college and I'll find out what computer science is when I get there. And that's what I did. I got there. I did literally and it was funny because, I know some people probably have had this experience, and I know I've talked to some of the students that I've taught, since, being a professor, that they didn't know anything about computer science and they come into the programs and, it's kind of hard. And, I remember meeting girls when I took my program in one class, and some of them were like, oh yeah, no, I programmed before. And, they asked, and, they're asking like, oh, how many people have programmed before? And it's like, I'm looking around like, what you mean how many people have programmed before? I thought everybody was new, right?
Right. Like, I'm here to learn it.
Yeah.
Right. This is 101.
This is 101, right? And so, so even then, right? So this was what, 94? Crap, 98. I'm sorry. I'm making myself older. This is 1998. Right. So I graduated from high school in 98, went straight to college.
And the year of our Lord, 1998.
The year of our Lord, 1998. So yeah, right. I show up to Spelman and I'm like, okay, y'all teach me what it means to be a computer scientist, right? I'm here. Let's go. And so, I was like, oh, I did my first program and I was done. I was in love. I was like, this is just everything. I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Like, I'm making computers do things. It was mind blowing for me, right? Like, I didn't look back. Like, I was just like, it's not easy, right? It wasn't like I wasn't some kind of wonderkind or whatever, right? But it was just like, this is what it means, right? It was just this really interesting way to create in a way that I didn't realize was going to be possible, right? And so I was able to bring a lot of the creativity that I enjoy for being an artist, right? And doing art into computer science. And so it was one of those things where it's like I didn't know what it was and I didn't know it was meant for me, but apparently it was. And I've been on since then.
Like, I'm gonna be on this train.
I'm on this train. I was like, I wanted to know everything about everything that computer science had to offer, like every single thing. And so I took classes, whatever classes we had, I took. If we had opportunity to take, because the Atlanta has that kind of consortium. I don't know if they still have it, but they have a relationship with all the universities in the city. And so, I could take classes at Georgia Tech, right? And so we didn't have compilers when I was at, Spelman. So I was like, I'm going to take compilers at Georgia Tech or whatever, right? And so I was just like, there's so much to know. And I was like, I'm not going to know everything by the time I'm done. I was like, I'm not going to know everything by the time I'm done. But I'm like, hopefully I'll know enough so I can get a job, right? Because that was the goal. So even
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're talking about like your whole experience, and you're at like an HBCU, right? So my question is, were you even like in classes with like all Black women? Were you taught by all Black women? Like, what was that?
Oh my God. Yes, Lord. Let me tell you something. Like, and it was crazy, right? Like, I didn't expect that, right? I didn't expect to go and so many of the professors to actually be Black and be Black women, right? And it was just like, that was something that was so significant to me. And it was a thing that I needed in my life that I didn't realize I needed in my life, right? Not that the whole department was Black, but most of the professors were Black. Most of the professors, even in the sciences. And I mean, having the experience of being at a HBCU as a faculty member, that's still not the case, that especially in the sciences, that I know most of the faculty are going to be Black. And so I realize now that I have, been in both positions, how much of a privilege and a pleasure it was. You know, I had the pleasure of having the Jamaica Burge be a professor at Spelman when I was there.
Yeah.
So Jamaica was a professor at Spelman when I was there. So that's where I met her. Right. That's my buddy. Shout out Jamaica. Hey girl. I love her.
Jamaica girl.
Yeah, we love her
so much.
She's our only 2-time guest.
I mean, and I told her this when I saw her a while back at a conference. I was like, you don't understand what you did for some of us that were there when you were there, because she was young and she was vibrant and she was so smart, and she was just like, I was just like, I want to be, this is who I want to be. Like, this is the computer science I want to be, right?
Look,
and so, so
I still want to be her.
Listen.
And I'm not even a computer scientist.
I know, right? I'm always
We'll have to clip it for her.
Oh my God. Like, she used to come, I'm gonna tell you, I know she's gonna be embarrassed. She used to come and she used to wear these scarves. I don't know if she's still how hard her scarf game is. She used to come in and she used to have these different scarves, and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is like everything. She's just everything. Like, she was such a good professor. And, you know, and it wasn't because it was like, you know, she was just so extra knowledgeable, but it was like she was trying to really get us excited about what we were learning, right? She really cared about what it was that we were doing. You know, she cared about our lives, right? And so I always endeavored to try and be that kind of professor, even when I got to Claflin and when I got to Morris, right? Because it was so impactful for me, right? And, you know, like, I remember we were in software engineering, we were taking a test, and there was a sister that had a baby, maybe about 5 months or whatever, previous. And so she had to bring the baby to class, right? And, you know, some people, they would have an issue with that, right? So she had to bring the baby to class, and the baby started fussing. Wow. And Jamaica took the baby and was like, you know, y'all go ahead and finish y'all tests or whatever, right? Now, you know, it got a little wild in there once she left the room. But it's that kind. We was all still college students. I was just like, I'm putting my eyes on my tests, and I'm gonna go about my business while y'all trading answers or whatever y'all do.
Right.
But yeah, right. You know,
your professor though, to take your baby while you're taking the test.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, don't have to.
Yeah. And so it was like, that I think those kinds of experiences were the kinds of things that I feel like made the environment more enriching, right? So not just to be surrounded by, and I mean, almost every class I took, most of the students at Spelman when I was there were Black women, right? We had a few people from other places, but most of the people there were Black women. Even we had some Morehouse guys come and visit us in some of the classes at some point, because, you know, they've been up and down as well. So shout out to Morehouse though. I love y'all. But yeah, no, it was great. I loved it. It was a unique environment, and it was not just about being able to learn, right? Being able to learn in a space where you don't have to worry about that imposter syndrome and some of that, like, you know, self-doubt, which is another thing I was looking for, right? You know, I had always been considered smart, right? I always did well in school, but the pushback, right? The pushback from administrators, and then from, you know, some faculty, some teachers, you know, in high school or whatever, about, you know, well, maybe you should do this instead of this, because, you know, this is typically not what
they think you're capable of.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, it was almost an issue, because, you know, like I said, I always wanted to go to Spelman, and the guidance counselor thought that was a bad idea. So the guidance counselor did not submit my early admissions paperwork to Spelman, because she thought I was better than Spelman at my high school. Oh yes, ma'am.
Wow.
So that was a very, very tense conversation once that came out.
Wow.
Like, you don't get to decide.
Right.
Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, it was.
They have way too much power.
That to me was one of those moments, right, where I was just like, this to me has just made me want to double down and have an experience.
Exactly. I'm about to show you
how
much Spelman
right?
is for me.
Because, you know, she was like, oh my God, you're so smart, and, you know, you can go anywhere. And, you know, we were in California, right? Most of the smart kids that were at the high school were going into the Cal system, right? They were going to Berkeley, they were going to Cal Poly, they were going all these places. I wanted nothing else to do with California. I wanted nothing else
Like,
to
get me
do.
out of here. Ain't no HBCUs over here on
Right.
the West
Well, yeah,
Coast.
and it
Get
also
me
didn't
out of
help
here.
that I was in the middle. I was up way up in California in like cow country. Like I know a lot of people don't realize California has cow country. But yeah, it was like we were out in the middle of nowhere in California, way up in Northern California. Like we had a rodeo team, and our Future Farmers of America kids had like animals. We had animals at high school. Like when I tell you, we lived
Oh
way
Lord.
up in the
Wow.
middle of nowhere in cow country.
That
Yes,
is,
yeah.
A
Our
I've
rodeo
never
club.
heard that
our rodeo
as
our
a high
rodeo
school
guys, our
experience.
rodeo team, they wore their buckles to prom. Honey, listen, it was like that. So
Wow.
you can imagine,
Wow.
I was like,
Wait.
I have to escape. This was the end of my educational
I
experience in
got to
K through
get out
12,
of
and I was
here.
like, I want all the blackness. I want all the black people. I want all the black things. I want all the black
I
experiences.
feel you.
I wanted it all, right?
No, I see why
Yeah.
you were.
Yes.
I see why you were dead set on Spelman.
Yes.
So okay, so you had this fortifying experience at Spelman, and somehow Northwestern got on your radar. You said, "I'm gonna go to a PWI." So how?
Wait.
Oh,
Look,
Are we
even
not?
before we get there, she was like, I don't want to go to more school.
Oh, that's
Yes.
right. You were
So
like,
I gotta
wanna
tell
get
that
this
story,
education to
right?
get a job.
I got to tell that story,
Yes.
right? Look, Jeremy, she on it. So again, I had no plans for grad school. I had no plans for grad school, right? Grad school wasn't on my radar. That wasn't a thing that I was just like, I'm just trying to get through undergrad and be a computer boss and go get me a job, probably consulting or somewhere. Accenture was always on campus, right? I wanted to go and travel the world, right? And be on a plane and, live my life, right? I was like team like Jet
And
Set.
flew it out.
Look, I was like, I'm gonna flew myself out, honey. Look, I was I was all about it, right? So that was the plan. I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get my skills set up and I'm gonna get me a job. And my junior year, I was like, I need to do something, right? And so I waited a lot because I was working. I worked actually full-time jobs while I was also in school. And so I literally usually had like 2 to 3 jobs. So I had a job, I think the summer before that in the mall. And I also had a job at Starbucks. So I ain't gonna give Starbucks no pub because they don't need it. But I loved it though. It was a fun job. Anyways, so I was like, I need a discipline specific opportunity. And so at the time, the chair of the department was Dr. Andrea Lawrence. Shout out to Dr. Lawrence. And she was like, you should go and do a research internship. And I was like, I don't want to do that, Dr. Lawrence. Why? I don't want to do that. She was like, I think you would enjoy it. She was just, because she used to always be like, you're not thinking about grad school? And I was like, no, I don't want to go to grad school. I don't want to go to more school. And so she was like, go do this internship. She's like, go do this internship or whatever. And then come back and tell me. And so when I tell y'all, this was literally the summer after my junior year, y'all. This was the summer after my junior year finished. So I end up getting this internship. I get an REU at Boston University. And so I go and hang out with those lovely folks at Boston University, Raquel and Roscoe and all of them. Shout out to them folks over in supercomputing.
Yeah.
Those are my
Those
people
the
too.
OGs.
OGs,
Yes.
yeah, OGs, y'all. That's how old I am, yeah, OGs. And so I actually worked with Raquel for my REU, right? And so, she's biology and she was just, bioinformatics was like a new thing. And so she was just like, well, here's this project or whatever, like, and I want you to do this thing. It was something that had to do with learning how to XML, right? Because everybody was using XML to kind of populate these bioinformatics.
There
like
was a second that XML was hot.
Yeah, it was hot. That was the hotness, right? And so it was like, kind of databases. Can we convert these databases or whatever to XML? And she was just like, give me your perspective on ways that we can maybe integrate these tools and stuff. And that was my first time doing like a real research project, right? A computer science based research project. And I had another one of those moments and I fell in love and I was like, wait a minute, hold on. So people actually get paid. Yeah. Like, cause my concept of what research was I think more like bench science, right? Where it's like, you gotta be, mixing some stuff or you gotta be doing a bunch of math that I didn't like.
shaking up and titrating.
Yeah,
and
shaking
all
up
that.
and titrating and watching machines and all that kind of stuff, right? So in my head, that was research, right? And so I had
Jeremy is shaking her head for those
I
of
know,
you who
I
can't
know.
see us. We're just listening.
Listen, y'all
I'm
get
an experimentalist.
y'all
Okay,
get
like that's
all the
Jeremy was
my
counting rocks
training.
for her dissertation.
y'all
and
get all the
cement and
respect
stuff.
because shout out to all my
Saying,
Northwestern
no.
peoples or whatever that was out there in the engineering department, because I was like, I couldn't be y'all. They was like, we couldn't be you. I was like, look, we just gonna stay on our side, look,
Yes.
and respect each other
Right.
mutually. But yeah, no, so that's what I
Yep.
thought research was, right? And so I get to this RU and I was like, so basically you just get to investigate problems and read stuff? I was like, I love to do that. I'm nosy, I'm curious, I like to problem solve. And then I get to read
She said
stuff.
I'm nosy.
I'm
And I get to
telling
learn
you,
new
if
stuff.
you nosy, research is for you.
If you nosy, listen, if you nosy, research is for you. So yeah,
That could be a
I had
t-shirt.
another one of those epiphanies literally at the very last second of my life in my academic experience, and I was just like, what? I was like, I want to do this now. And so senior year, I am now trying to make myself a viable candidate for a graduate program. So that meant,
Shout out to Dr. Lawrence.
Shout
for
out to
just
Dr.
telling
Lawrence.
You to, hey, go do this.
She
and
did.
Setting you on that trajectory.
I would not be Dr. Deidra Morrison Wells if it was not for Dr. Lawrence. So shout out to Dr. Lawrence. But yeah,
You think she would come on the podcast? We like her.
Nobody said she won't come on. I mean, come on, Dr. Lawrence, come on.
Put in a good word for us.
Look, I was about to say, I feel like I've lost touch with so many people. It's wild, but yeah, nah. If I see her, I'm like, yeah, definitely, come on, Dr. Lawrence, come on. You the absolute modern figure. But yeah, so
We might have to go to her.
You might, you just might. But yeah, so that was how I ended up deciding that I was like, I'm gonna go to grad school. And so then it was kind of like, well, do I need to get a PhD? Do I need to get a master's degree? What do I do? Right. And so another person that was really influential while I was at Spelman was Dr. Charles Hartnett. And so Dr. Hartnett is he was at Georgia Tech, I think. That's where he did his PhD work at. And so he was really helpful in really kind of helping me to figure out, well, what kind of program should I apply to? What am I trying to do? Right. Where do I see actually using my PhD? Because again, I was more so like, I want to do research. I wasn't like, I want to be a professor. And so you see, there's going to be another story there, right? Because I was like, I don't want to be. I wasn't planning on being a.
There are several other stories.
So like I said, non-traditional path, right?
You got a whole postdoc too.
Yeah, non-traditional path, right? And so, he was like, well, look, if you don't know if you want to do a PhD, but you may want to do a PhD, he was like, just apply for PhD programs. And he was like, if it's not for you, then get your master's and get out of there. Right. And so I was like, okay, good advice, right? Good advice. So, so that was kind of the plan, right? I also had made my life more complicated because at the time, I was dating my now husband, long distance. So, my husband was a student at Morehouse. We're such a stereotype. He was a student at Morehouse, and that's where we met.
The whole spell house.
Yes,
thing.
That's where we met, and
So cute.
and then he ended up having to transfer to another university, so he ended up leaving. So we were in a long distance relationship, but we were trying to come back together, right? And so I was trying to figure out, well, where can I go to college? Where can I go and apply for PhD programs? And where can we both be in the same place? Because he was doing the same thing, right? So he was applying for PhD programs as well. So, Northwestern became an option more so, well, partly because it was also co-located with one of his choices. and another reason was someone that was a PhD student at Northwestern came and did the grad school fair, right? And it's funny, right? And so I'll tell you what's funny about that. So, she came, she was by herself, she wasn't with anybody else. And so she was like, well, I'm a current grad student. And I thought I didn't know that was unique, right? As I got to Northwestern and we started having conversations with administrations, I realized how very unique that was, because Northwestern is like, we don't need to recruit for anything. You know what Northwestern is or you don't, and you come or you don't. And that was, I don't know if that attitude has changed, but that was the attitude for sure back then. They were like, we are Northwestern, so we don't need to go send nobody nowhere. But I met this woman, I met this sister over there. Right. I haven't got to that part of the story yet. I ain't got to the part. Just wait for that part. So, so yeah, I mean, and she, you know, she gave, I had no idea who Northwestern was. I had no idea. And you know, she gave me a lot of really good information. She talked to me about the experience of being a Black student there. And, you know, some of the challenges. She gave me a lot of real talk, right? She gave me real spit, as my husband would say.
Yeah, because it wasn't the rodeo.
Oh no,
but it was a different kind of.
It was not the rodeo, but you know,
it was a different kind of arena.
It was crew, not the rodeo, but crew, right? Crew and rugby, not rugby. What's the other one? What's the other one with the sticks? I can't think of the name.
Lacrosse.
Crew and lacrosse. Right. So yeah, right. You know, so she was like, you know, I really value my experience. She was like, there's a lot of support there. You know, there's not a lot of us, but she was like, you will find support. She was like, the BGSA is really strong, you know, all this stuff. Right. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, y'all are on my list or whatever. Right. And so, and then I actually had a conversation with Raquel from Boston, and she was like, oh, you know, I know somebody over there. Right. And they can talk to you about the program, somebody that's actually in computer science. And so that was how Northwestern ended up on my list. They ended up on my list. I had a couple of other places, but I think I only had one HBCU. Did I have any HBCUs on my list? I don't know if I did, because there wasn't a lot of computer science PhD programs at that point, right? Because we're talking about 2002. There weren't a lot of PhD programs. There wasn't even a lot of master's programs. So, you know, I applied to a couple of master's programs. I applied to some PhD programs. I was pretty ambitious, I would say, because I applied to some serious programs, y'all. I was like... I can convince these folks to let me in. Listen, I'm gonna learn this computer, and I'm gonna go ahead and research this computer, and it's gonna be great. And so, you know, look, I got turned down by plenty as well. It probably didn't help that I worked the night before I had to take my computer science subject test. So I was literally in Starbucks studying for the test, and I fell asleep through most of it.
Keep plugging Starbucks. Are they paying you?
They're not. Me and Starbucks, we have such a love-hate relationship. Me and Starbucks just got back together. That's another thing. Look, because I wasn't even at Starbucks for a while.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, no, yeah. So yeah, no, I didn't do great on my computer science subject test because I fell asleep during most of it, and those people let me sleep. I didn't pay these people $100, and they let me sleep during this test because I had been up. And then the test started at like 8 a.m. or something like that, and I had been working the night before, so yeah, it's hard, y'all. Look, and I hope anybody that's watching this understands, like, it's hard, but perfection is not required. Perfection is not required to get here, right? It's not required to be successful in this space. And don't let perfectionism gatekeep you out of an opportunity that you want, right? So hopefully that part ends up in. So that's something that you can take away from it. Yeah, because I've learned that over the years and with my experience, because I was not the top student, right? I wasn't even the top student at Spelman. Like, I breezed through high school. I got to Spelman. I was like, this is hard. Like, this is not easy. Right? You know, like I failed a class for the first time. I had to take physics. Fine. Right. I had to take physics twice. Oh, physics. I had to take physics twice. You know, I barely made it through some of these classes. It was rough, right? And I realized, I was like, I'm smart, but being smart is not enough, right? You got to learn how to learn. And I spent a lot of time figuring that out, right? But yeah, so where I go, Jeremy, get me back on track.
This is before you were about to go to Northwestern.
Gotcha.
So they were on your radar. Raquel told you all the information. Right. That you need to know, so you know, like, I'm going.
Even though I wasn't the best student, I reached, right. So I was like, I'm gonna apply to places that have the kind of research that I think I want to do, right? So based on the kind of work that I was interested in and the kind of class material I was interested in, that's how I targeted the places that I wanted to go. And so I ended up, it was between, I got into Northeastern, I got into Northwestern. I got into Virginia Tech. They was tardy though. They was very tardy. I was like, oh, okay, y'all. I done already accepted something. Like, y'all tardy.
Right.
But
It's the
yeah.
first day of classes, and y'all giving me the acceptance letter.
Right. Okay. Oh, nearly,
This is
right?
probably the summertime.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think they have like a very late, thing. They have a very late acceptance.
Yeah,
period.
they do rolling admissions.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it ended up being more so having a conversation with the student that came really kind of swayed me because I was really waiting. I had my heart set on Northeastern. I really did, and it just didn't end up working out that way. And I think that was divine providence, right? So I'm a firm believer in you end up exactly where you're supposed to be. And I needed to be there, right? So part of what I needed was at Northwestern. And so that's how I ended up at Northwestern. It was quite the experience. It was quite the experience indeed. So yeah. I was about to say, do I need
Was
to?
it like
In
a
a good
culture
way?
shock?
It wasn't
I
so
mean, you can
much
give us
for
the
me.
highlights of
It wasn't so much for me because I had that experience in K through 12, right? So I was used to not being the
She
majority.
was at the rodeo school.
Yeah, I was at the rodeo school. I was just like
Yes.
the hardest thing was getting used to the weather. That was the hardest thing. I was not prepared. I was coming from Atlanta, and
I was gonna ask that.
oh my God, I was coming from Atlanta, and I had never seen a radiator before. And then I was looking for apartments
Wow.
in Evanston,
Wow.
which is the main campus for Northwestern. It's
Oh,
right outside,
geez.
suburb right outside of Chicago proper. And they were like, "Oh yeah, well you can get a unit." And I'm like, "A unit? What's a unit?" And they're like, "Yeah, for your air conditioning." And I was like, "I'm sorry, like a window box?" And they were like, "Yeah, like a window box." And I was like, "Oh wait, so I got to go and buy my air? Okay." And then I was like, "Well, what about the heat? Where the heat gonna come from?" They were like, "Oh, it comes from the radiator." I'm like, "What's
Oh
a
my
radiator?"
gosh.
So yeah, no, that was definitely a culture shock. So needless to say, I moved to the suburbs because I needed central heating and air. I needed HVAC. I was like, I can't be responsible for this.
Correct.
Um,
I am accustomed to a certain standard of living.
I am accustomed to listen. I'm not
Oh,
bougie in
my
everything,
word.
but I was bougie in that. I was like, that's not gonna work. So yeah, no, I think the biggest transition that was hard, right? Being away because I also had a very strong social support in Atlanta. So some of my best friends, my family, my chosen family. I met them in Atlanta, and we are still chosen family, and we still live our lives as family. Shout out to Tiara and Candace and Ramon. So yeah, that's my peoples. But yeah, so my chosen family was out there. I was used to living a certain way, right? I was used to being immersed in the lovely blackness that I enjoy, right? And I think in terms of the academic environment, one of the things I think that was the hardest was having to acclimate to the actual imposter syndrome, right? And so being a grad student, and because Northwestern didn't quite have all their stuff together at that point, I had to take a couple of classes over. So I had to take a couple of classes that I took in undergrad because their program was not very well constructed at that point. They had a number of transitions where the School of the Computer Science Department and the Learning Sciences Department had been in transition over a number of years where they were one department and then they split, and they were one department and they split, and then computer engineering and computer science were one department and then they split. So they had a couple of iterations. And so at the time that I got there,
It's a broken home.
at the time I got to Northwestern to their computer science program, they had been split from learning sciences, but it wasn't a clean split. So there was a lot of things that were still part of the curriculum that were kind of in learning sciences in some other places. And so they were really still kind of trying to get some of that separation done. So I remember being I was a first year grad student, and I took database again. I took operating systems again because it was just I needed courses, right? I needed classes. And
There
I needed
wasn't
credits.
course offerings.
Yeah, there weren't as many kind of
That's
grad
real.
level
I mean,
course offerings. Yeah. And so,
Yeah, whenever
Yeah.
they're establishing new like curriculum for a department, that always happens. Where it's like, there's a sequence of courses they want you to take,
yep.
but if they can't offer those courses,
Yep.
you can't progress through the program, and
Right.
then you kind of just float there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
cautionary tale.
Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, taking classes with undergrads and them, they questioning me about my credentials. I'm like, I was like, I'm a grad
This is what we're
student.
not going to do.
I'm a grad student, honey. Like, like being in classes. I mean, there were classes
Right.
at Northwestern where I was literally the only black person in the class. Um, I wasn't generally. They did
Yeah.
a better job with women. There weren't as many. There weren't that many, but they did a little better job with women. But there were whole classes I took. I was the only black person there. And mostly because there was one other black woman that was in the program. And then she had already kind of gone through. So I think she might have been 2 years ahead of me, maybe. I think she was maybe about 2 years ahead of me. And so she was the only one. She was the only one
Wow.
black woman. There was another guy that was a black male that was in the program, and that was it. And so I ended up
Did you just declare your masters along the way, or like?
they had an option at Northwestern where you could apply for the PhD program and you could do the masters along the way. So it wasn't required. So you
Yeah.
could do the masters
Okay.
if you chose. So you could do a master's thesis, or you could do I think that's what you had to do, a master's thesis. And then they didn't have an actual testing requirement. So you just did your master's thesis, and if it got approved, then you were good. And so you could decide to do it, because I think they kind of had a more traditional, I think of it as a traditional model where it's like, people they jump out of the program with the masters, right? So, students that were just like, I can't take it
Yeah.
anymore, or they're just like, the PhD is not for me. They do a master's thesis and get on up out of there. And so I did do a
Right.
master's
Here's the
thesis.
consolation prize.
It's consolation prize. Look, I think of it as, I'm like, it's all hard won, because if you stay long enough to be able to do a master's thesis, you done your job.
Right.
Go and take your papers and wave them around like you
You
just
have
don't
put up with
care.
a whole lot.
There, listen, because
What was your research area
so when I initially came
at that
in,
point?
the advisor I had was actually joint appointed in computer science and in the journalism school. And so he was doing research on like RSS and like all these kind of like web-based technologies, right? And so
Wow.
that's kind of how I ended up making that transition, right? And so the research that I did for my master's was mostly based on kind of these tools, like using, because that was like wikis became a new thing, right? So wikis were new, RSS feeds were new. Boy, this is taking it back, boy.
RSS uses XML and all
Right,
that.
again,
Yeah.
right? Using those
Like, oh yeah, I forgot there was a point where that was not new, where that was not a thing.
exactly, right? So being able to kind of, use these databases like APIs, that kind of stuff, right? And so, yeah, so it was more so like looking at being able to integrate these different kinds of things, pulling data to be able to help people to understand or, sense make around certain kinds of things, right? That wasn't the language I was using. But yeah, so that was the kind of work that I did. And I ended up doing once I ended up going for the summer, I went for the first summer to IBM in 2004. And so I got a IBM internship that summer. And so that also heavily influenced a lot of that early work, right? Because it was really looking at, that was when I really started to get into social networking. So I started to get into social networking and that kind of stuff. A little bit of natural language processing, but not as much, but mostly the social component. So that's where that I picked up that social component, was working with that advisor, doing work on, how people were interacting in spaces, being able to kind of, cluster language and get, do sentiment analysis on what people were thinking. How do you actually create, integrations between kind of social networking platforms and in other sources of data, so as people kind of collaborated around things. So that was kind of the early work that I did. And that kind of got cemented. I got a chance to see my friend Jamaica when I went out to IBM. So we were actually at IBM that same summer. So that was nice. I was like,
That is so
hey,
funny.
I know, right? I also met Brandeis Marshall. Well, not she. Is
Oh,
she Marshall?
wow.
She's not Marshall no more, is she? Is she Marshall?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember.
Field Marshall. Everybody has multiple last
Right.
names.
I know, right? Like I can talk.
She was
But
also, we had her on a while ago.
yeah. So yeah, we was out there kicking it up a little bit in California. So yeah, and so I worked in the they had just kind of started this area of services research at the IBM Almaden location. And so that really also got me more interested in kind of social computing. And like, I was calling it social computing before I guess it was kind of defined, because I was like, that's what it sounded like to me, right? It's like
Right.
socialization, communication, like, all of these kind of things. And so that was really where the social component came in. I started really looking at that, right? And so so once I kind of came back and I did some of these internships, right? So as I started doing these internships, that was really how a lot of my interests really started to solidify. And so the second internship I did at IBM, I went back in 2005. I worked with somebody who does more like information visualization, sense making, kind of that kind of stuff, decision task support. And so you can see that ended up heavily influencing what I ended up doing for my PhD. So I did not stay with my first advisor. I did my master's and we parted ways. I ain't gonna get into that drama, but we parted ways.
As many of us do.
Yes, we parted ways because that wasn't gonna work. I hope he's doing well, but I will look. I'm gonna be a little petty. I will say this: I left after he left, so he was gone before I was gone. So I'll say that much.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeesh. Well, the writing was on the wall.
listen, after I'm gonna say this much though, right? So what really disappointed me about that scenario was he was one of the only Black professors in the department, and getting the kind of unhelpful feedback from him, right? Like it felt like a lot of the internalized kind of prejudice that was around there was being presented to me. And I was very confused because I was kind of like, I was ready to feel like, oh, I'm safer, right? Because this is people, right? This is family, right? And I wasn't, right? And and I don't know how much of that was just whatever stuff he was dealing with, but it made him very ineffective in our actual advisee relationship. And that was really, really disappointing to me because it gave me another one of those hard learned lessons that was really valuable, that you can't always rely on everybody in the community to share your perspectives and share your goals. Because I remember he was like, I think you should just
really want to do a panel on this.
He told me before my
Let's do it at Tapia.
Yeah, listen, I come on there and talk.
Skin folk ain't kinfolk.
Skin folk ain't kinfolk. You already know.
All skin folk ain't kinfolk.
All skin folk ain't kinfolk. And so he literally told me that he didn't think I would be able to make it. And he was like, I think you should go and find some community college program or something and get your skills set up, and then maybe reapply to another school. Yeah.
What you won't do is
listen. And he told me he thought I should drop out of Northwestern. He thought I should leave Northwestern, and he thought I should go to another school and become more technically proficient, and then go and apply to a less rigorous PhD program. Yeah, that's what he told me.
And this is why it's important to know who you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you had
Right.
that HBCU experience to be like,
That's
look,
what it
you ain't about to
was.
tell me who I am.
Had I not been at Spelman, I think that would have broke me, right? And I would have never finished that program. I would have never finished that program, but I had already been sewn into too well. I was just like, nah. I'm like, you just don't understand because we not communicating well.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we're
it's
not
like,
communicating well, right? You just don't understand, right? I was just like, nah, I'm here. Like, I got in here. I'm staying here. I'm gonna get this
Right.
degree, right?
Right.
It may not happen
Focus on
how.
getting your tenure, sir.
Listen. And again, like I said,
Okay.
I was gone after
And
he
so she
so
left
so he so
and
yeah.
then
But yeah,
started
no.
working with someone new.
So well, yeah, and so that was even some drama, right? Because it turns out that the previous advisor went and basically sullied my name with the person that I was getting ready to try and get on their team. Yeah. Yeah. And so
Raggedy.
I spent a year where I was not enrolled in any courses. And so I ended up working for the grad school for the diversity office. I ended up working for the grad school. So they was basically like, we got you. Like, we're going to put you to work doing websites and doing Microsoft Access databases and whatever. And, until you figure it out. Right. And shout out to IBM.
Awesome.
Listen, IBM, Terry at IBM Almaden. That's my homie. Terry from IBM Almaden.
Terry's the best.
I saw him at Tapia. And I had just it was the first quarter that I wasn't enrolled in anything. I wasn't enrolled. And so I hadn't left the university, but I was like, I don't have any funding because I don't have an advisor. And this other professor was like, well, I don't just let anybody in my lab, right? You're going to have to basically kind of, do these series of things or whatever. And then I'll consider, inviting you to my lab or whatever. And so, Terry was like, wait, what's going on? So I was like, so here's the deal, right? And he was just like, nah, you're not leaving Northwestern. He was like, we're going to figure something out. And so then I saw him at Tapia and he was like, I need you to fill out this application. And I was like, what application? He was like, I need you to fill out this gym fellowship application. And I was like, Jim did PhD? He was like, yes, Jim does PhD. He was like, fill this out. IBM is going to be your corporate sponsor and we going to get this done.
Yes.
Shout out listen, I've had so many people come into my life that have they're the reason why I've been able to be where I need to be. Right. And again, that's one of those things where it's like, if you move in a way that honors kind of what you're trying to do, then you'll end up where you want to be. It may not always be good. It may hurt some, but it's, I ended up where I am. So yeah. So Terry was like, he got me a gym fellowship. And that's how I ended up back in school.
Wow.
And it turned out that
So they hired you because they were like, oh, she's free now, so we can take her.
Right.
Right. Well, I don't know how I don't know how glad they are about that, right? Because I didn't end up going to work for IBM, right? So, usually that's what the point is, right?
No, your advisor.
The advisor being
they
like,
didn't.
Oh, I don't have to pay for
they
this
didn't.
student.
They didn't hire me. I didn't get in the lab. So, well, that's some fun drama as well, right? So I told you, right? The previous advisor I had,
They playing.
the previous advisor I had went and, unbeknownst to me, had went and badmouthed me to this professor. So I'm working hard trying to do all these things, right? But again, I'm not a student at this time, right? I'm an employee at a university at this point, right? Doing things to try and, work with his students on their research. And it ended up coming to a head because there was miscommunication. And so through this miscommunication, that's how I found out that my previous advisor had, really tried to spoil this opportunity. And so this professor, to their credit, was like, I am so sorry, right? Like, I've been dealing with you under these pretenses. And so, he was like, I'm sorry. And so we had a decent relationship moving forward. But one of the other professors in the department, he was the advisor to a friend of mine, Yolanda Rankin. Shout out Yolanda Rankin. And so
I was gonna ask if y'all crossed paths.
Oh yeah, no, Yolanda, she came in after I did. That's my buddy. I love Yolanda. That's my buddy. But yeah, so her advisor, he was a pretty, cool dude. And so he was just like, what's going on with you? Right. And so I was talking to him about the situation and he was just like, you should come join my lab. He was like, you should just come join my lab. I was just like, okay. and so through
sometimes it's just that much.
Yeah. And so through his lab is where I picked up the information visualization part. So because he was a graphics professor or whatever, right? So I did not end up. So even though the other professor, once we kind of, we kind of, resolved whatever the issues were, we were working well together, but the transition with the actual advisor that I had, it felt like a better fit because we had a really good working style, and we communicated really well. And so he was really just like, I hate to see you go. The other professor was like, I really hate to see you go. If you change your mind, let me know. You're welcome to the lab, and da 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 da.
Okay.
So
I'm not mad anymore.
Yeah. So no,
I was mad.
Yeah.
I'm not mad anymore.
Yeah. So I had three. I had.
Was
so you wasn't trying to get me in the first place. So
I had two in the possible.
Okay.
He was really like, are you sure? He was like, are you sure? I hope this doesn't have anything to do with the previous issues. And I was like, no, it really doesn't. I was like, the work that I'm really trying to do is transitioning in this way. And I do feel like this other professor, and that was the case, really. I did really feel like the other professor would have been a better match to the kind of work I wanted to do. He was already kind of very nice. Interdisciplinary. I've learned over the years, you got to take people where they are, right? And hurt people, which is another thing I've learned from my psychologist husband.
That's
true. Hurt people. Humans gone human. And
right.
You can, perspective doesn't require, acceptance. Right. Perspective doesn't require acceptance. You can understand the perspective and how someone got to the decision making without being supportive of their decision making. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But
when you said humans gonna human, I said computers gonna human too. Yeah. Because that was where my brain was about all of this.
Yes.
So I need to go take a break, I feel like, from these conversations about computer science, because
hilarious.
The computers are going to human too.
Oh, the computers are humaning so much. And in all the problematic ways that the humans human. And I'm like, can we stop that though?
Oh yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Humans make the computers.
Yes, because humans
make
the computers.
That they're exhibiting human features.
Exactly.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to cut things short because I know you have to get out of here soon.
Well, I can probably
do in academia.
I can probably do a little bit. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's get to that story because I feel like that's another thing that our listeners may not know.
Yeah. So you decided, you know what, I'm gonna get this professor situation on and popping. And then you was popping for a minute.
And Poppington.
It was hot. And then you were like, nah.
I wasn't planning on popping though. That was never the plan either, right? Because remember, I went to grad school to go become a researcher. I did 2 summers at IBM research.
Not to get no professorship.
I wasn't planning on being no tenure-track professor. I would go, and you could ask, shout out to Dr. Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert is my homie. I would go to these conferences, right? And Dr. Gilbert, he became a mentor to me unofficially when I moved to Auburn. So
ARCS.
Huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right.
No, yeah, when I moved to Auburn.
Conference.
Yeah. So I knew of him, but I didn't really know him. I mean, I'd seen him at conferences and things like that, but I didn't know him. And then my husband, so we got married. Me and my husband got married. And he had to do an internship as part of his graduation requirements. And so that's what put us in Alabama because he did his internship at the VA in Tuskegee. And so I was like, oh boy, we're moving to Alabama. And so I'm newly married, trying to finish a PhD, popped up and got pregnant like right after I got married. So that was fun. And so I'm trying to finish a dissertation away from campus. And trying to, stay awake and not, be sick. Right. And then, once the baby came, being a mom. But so I ended up getting a chance to actually meet with Juan, and he unofficially kind of started to help me as I was trying to finish my dissertation because they were right up the street, right? And so I'll go to the lab sometimes, and I'll be like, oh well, I'm trying to do this thing or this thing, and he's like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I think this is really good research, or you maybe want to take this thing, come to the library if you need books or you need to get papers or whatever. So, he was really another person that was very influential in my life, right? And so, I'm in Auburn, Alabama, trying to finish my dissertation. I want to do research. I'm now a 2-body problem. Right? Because my husband is like, he's not going to be in academia. He's going to be a clinical psychologist. And so I was like, I'm trying to figure out how I can make a research career work, right? How do I make a research career work? Can I make a research career work if I'm not in an industry? Can I make a research career work in academia? How do you do that coming straight out of a PhD program, right? And so I would ask these questions when they would have panels and stuff at conferences, and everybody would look at me like, that ain't how you do that. Right? Like, they're like, no, that's not how that works. Like, literally, that's how everybody would always tell me, like, that's just not how it works. You know, you just go and you go get you a tenure track position and then get your tenure and then you can do what you want. And I'm like, I don't want to do all that before. Right? I'm like, I just want to get to, you know, like, what was that? Ocho Cinco, you say that, don't tell me about the pain, just show me the baby. I was like, I just want to see the baby. Right? I'm trying to get to the baby.
I can't.
And so, you know, I was just like, I didn't know what to do, right? And so 2008 hits and the economy goes to crap, and the Computer Research Association was like, we can't lose all these PhD students, right? Because there's no jobs. And so I talked to Juan, and he was like, you should apply to the CI fellowship. And so I was like, okay. So I looked into it, and I was just like, postdoc, all right. And I was just like, well, if I postdoc, do I have to teach? And he was like, if you postdoc with me, you don't have to teach. And so I was like, okay. Oh. And so this was right as he was transitioning to Clemson, right? And so he was transitioning to Clemson, and he was just like, you know, I'm going to Clemson. He was like, you know, I think it's going to be really great over there. He was like, if you want to apply to CI fellow and be a postdoc in my lab, you know, come on. And so I was like, okay, we'll figure this out. And so I applied, and it was really good too that I applied, because my dissertation committee was they were kind of lax, right? And they were kind of like moving. We were all in different places. So my advisor had moved on from Northwestern, but he was still getting students out. So he was in Canada. So he had gotten a position in Canada. So he was, wow. Yeah. And I was in Alabama, and some of my other committee members were at Northwestern still. And so I was just like, I got to get this thing done. And so that was one of the things that was really helpful. So once I applied, they were like, you have to be done and defended by this time. And so I was like, hey, committee, I got this postdoc. Y'all need to come on and read this thing and let me defend this dissertation, which worked out. It worked out. Mm-hmm. But
come on and read this thing.
Yeah. And so even as I transitioned into academia, the goal was still research. The goal was still to have a research career, mm-hmm. and trying to figure out how to do that. And so as a postdoc, that was my primary responsibility. I just worked with the students, and I supervised some of the research projects. I worked on my own research projects. I learned how to write grants, proposals, which, you know, didn't really get funded because, you know, I didn't know what I was doing. But and, you know, you always got to have that lineage attached to it. But yeah, so I learned about kind of the everyday activities of research in the field, but I didn't end up teaching until later, right? So I held on as long as I could, right? So I transitioned my postdoc to a research professorship at Clemson. And but, you know, that's one of the things that you have to deal with, especially if you're doing it in academia, right? It's like, you got to have the funding. If you don't have the funding, you don't have the position. And so eventually it got to the point where, you know, I wasn't able to be as successful as I wanted to be. And so I had a conversation with my husband, and he was just like, well, why don't you just consider teaching? And I was just like, I don't know. And he was like, well, if you can teach and if you can do research, then why don't you just give it a try? Give it a try. Tell me if you like it. If you don't like it, then you don't have to do it anymore, right? And I was just like, okay, all right, you know, that's fair. That's fair, right? And so, yeah, so that's how I ended up transitioning from research professorship to tenure track faculty, right? The cybersecurity component of the research that I do came into play when I got to Morris, right? So Morris College is one of the smaller HBCUs out in Sumter, South Carolina. And they were part of a long-term grant consortium funded by the Department of Energy. And so they were trying to establish their computer science program, their cybersecurity program. And so someone we know was like, oh, yeah, they're looking for somebody. Would you be interested in this? And so I was like, yeah, sure. I'd definitely be interested in helping to, build a department, right? Build a program.
Right.
I was able to participate in some of that as a postdoc and as a professor at Clemson, as Juan was putting together the human centered computing programs, right? So I was there as they were he's putting that together, and he got all that stuff approved. That's where I met Kyla. So we met at Clemson.
That's right.
Yep. And yeah, so I ended up transitioning to academia there, right? And I always had a sense that if I was going to teach, I always told myself, and I used to tell this to other people, if I was going to teach, I would have preferred to do it at HBCU. And the reason why I would have preferred to do it there is because of how much my HBCU experience gave me, right? And, being able to look back, right? And see how the actual Black professors that I got to engage with really impacted my life, right? And so I was like, listen, if I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna have to teach, I want to teach at HBCU. And so that was another
Yeah, no, it
reason.
makes sense.
Yeah, that was another reason that I was just like, well, I'll transition, right? I'll transition to academia, but I wanted to do it in a way that I could be as impactful as other people were for me. So yeah. So that's how I ended up doing the academic track. And so I went from Morris, and then I went to Claflin, which was also part of the same kind of cybersecurity consortium. And yeah, and I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work. I did a lot of teaching. Not as much research as I wanted. But yeah, I mean, I still got a chance to engage with some research projects and work with some people, meeting new collaborators, learning new things, right? Because again, I'm nosy. I want to learn all the stuff, right? And so the cybersecurity component
Right.
really became really interesting to me, and the actual intersections of cybersecurity and human-centered computing and social computing and stuff was where I finally transitioned in terms of research interests. Yep. So
How did you end up in industry though? Because that's where you are now, right?
Yeah. Because
so
eventually, even though
yeah,
you were thriving, you decided to transition
I
out.
did. I was thriving. I was
That's
on
a
the
story
tenure
we don't
track.
usually get.
I was doing the thing, right? I was doing all the things. I was, making it work. And the pandemic. It was really the pandemic really affected me in a number of ways. And it crystallized for me that although I was enjoying being able to be kind of the impactful presence in the lives of the students, and really being able to kind of explore a lot of different kinds of concepts, I felt like I was doing a lot of things for a lot of people, and I wasn't able to really be able to engage in the kind of projects I wanted to engage in, right? I wasn't able to really take the time that I wanted to take to be able to do the kind of research that I wanted to do. I wasn't able to program. I hadn't written a program, and I don't even remember how long, and it broke my heart. Like, I think the last semester I taught at Claflin, I taught programming languages, and I was kind of excited about that because it was like, oh, I get to write programs now because I got to write the programs for, the classes and stuff, right? And that was one of those things where I was just like, what am I doing? I was like, I'm getting up here, right? Like, I think I turned 40. I turned 40 in 2020, and I was just like, I don't want to look back and say, I could have, and I wish I would have. And if it weren't for this thing, or I wish I could have done this thing or that thing. And so I just decided I'm going to bet on myself, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to do the things that I really enjoy about the job, but I don't have to do it here, right? Y'all are both professors, right? Y'all understand that,
Oh, yeah.
the work, what the mission is doesn't always translate to what the work ends up being, right? And so
Correct.
right. And so, ultimately,
Correct.
I really enjoyed the time I spent there, but I felt like this is not the work. This is not the work. And it shouldn't be this hard, right? It shouldn't be this hard to collaborate with
Yeah.
people, to create meaningful experiences for students, to be able to actually teach them how to do research, right? So giving them the time to be able to
Yeah.
do these things, right? So it's like all these things were in the way of being able to really engage students in the way that I wanted to to engage technology in the way that I wanted to continue to be current in the field, right? I mean, that's one of those other things that being a professor nobody talks about, right? Is that, you know, you got to pick your lane, and that's your lane, right?
Yeah.
Because that's your lifeline, right? Because you have to be this expert in this thing. And you know, and some of that really just didn't vibe with my creative spirit, right? Some of it just didn't vibe with it, right? I wanted to be able to do things that were more out of the box, and I'm not, you know, well, I mean, you know, being at Clemson, I know that big schools, little schools, it doesn't really matter. Schools are invested in their processes, right? They're invested in their processes, whether they work or whether they don't, whether they're efficient or whether they're not.
Yep.
Whether they actually
and you've seen it all.
University, so
oh yeah,
hello,
right, and so you know,
like you've been in every type of institution, so you've seen how those processes fail,
right? And I think I kind of got tired of it, right? Because even as a research professor, you still saw some of that, right? It's like this balancing act that you have to have, and you know, I'm not telling y'all anything new, right? The balancing act is hard, you know, being able to really find meaningful enjoyment in what you're doing and also get the job done it's hard, right? And another thing was I was just less inclined to sacrifice the well-being of my family unit, right? So that's another thing that I felt like was really important. Is my son had to transition online. He was in the house, right? So, you know, there was a point we were all in the house, right? He's trying to do school, I'm trying to teach classes. And I was just kind of like, nah, I need to show him something different, right? I need to show him that the relationship that you can have to what you do to support yourself can be different, and it can be enriching in ways that, you know, what we, and you know, my generation, and I'm not sure, maybe y'all's generation as well, the kind of things that were kind of, you know, put into us about work. I don't know. I guess are y'all are considered millennials, I guess, right? Are y'all millennials?
I don't know what I am.
Yes, Kyla,
so
you're a
okay.
I
millennial.
forget the numbers and what's the
Right.
cutoff.
So
She's a millennial. I am too.
Yeah.
I'm at the end. So there's
Yeah.
my brother is not, but I am.
Right.
It's weird.
But yeah, I mean, you know, like I think a lot of one of the things that, you know, y'all get a bad rap, but I don't think y'all should get a bad rap, right? Because I think one of the
I
things
know people just want to say millennials when they mean young people,
right?
But millennials got back problems, so
we already on Gen Z, right? We on Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
Right.
We on Greek letters at this point, aren't we?
No, there's a new one. Yeah, there's a new one. Yeah.
But
I don't know what they are.
yeah, no, I feel like one of the things that I feel like is associated with millennials that I find to be so refreshing is this idea that you don't have to do work just to do work, right? I feel like that's a disservice that was given to my generation and maybe some of the generations before, right? And you don't have to sacrifice everything for a job, right? You know, yeah, you want to be able to
You're
live.
not a cog in a cog factory.
Exactly. And I think your humanity has to be able to come to the spaces that you're in. And you know, it should be able to be something that you don't hate. Like everybody shouldn't be at work hating being at work, you know?
And I feel like we've been taught, oh, you're lucky to have this job. You should be grateful. You should be this. Yes, you are grateful for your opportunities, but also you're not going to kill me. You won't break my soul. Said
we
the
also
poetess
like
Beyonce.
go to therapy.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. I love that. Like,
They don't.
I love that the children go to
They don't
therapy.
be
Well, I
doing
guess, you know, I'm sorry, I called it anybody that's basically like 29 or younger is like the children as far as I'm concerned at this point. But yeah, like, you know, it's like
we going over the boomers. We got to go because of the boomers. They won't go, but
So-
we can go to
yeah.
fix some of their stuff.
Yeah. So that's a whole nother podcast. But yeah.
That's a different podcast. Yeah.
It's so it was really like I wanted to be able to live and work in a space where I felt like I could be creative in the way I could be creative and still be, you know, effective. I have clients that I work with that are in academia. I have clients that I work with that own startups. I have clients that just have small businesses. And so I want to be able to provide the richness that I receive from all of the experiences I have to people, right? Because, you know, I feel like another thing that academia is doing is really exacerbating the divide between what's happening in the real world in terms of technology and what's actually like going on at schools, right? You know,
Yes.
it's and
We're having a lot of conversations about
oh
that
yeah, yeah.
in my area
Oh
because
yeah.
it's, you know, in engineering education and computer science education, like, you know, what is actually happening and what are we actually teaching?
Yep.
Like, and there's a
There
misalignment
is.
It's the
there
real
with a
world and
lot of what we're doing.
Narnia. There's the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then there's actual life.
Yes.
And the two,
Yeah.
Yes.
do
They're not
meet.
talking to each other,
They're not.
like, you know, big universities, they have these advisory boards of people from all over
I'm sorry.
different types
I
of
shouldn't laugh like
companies or
that.
whatever, and they're supposed to be giving input and all this stuff, and it's just like they're just talking
Yeah.
at each other.
Yeah.
But they do
Nobody's
give
like,
input, but nobody
they
wants
do.
to change. Like, so for
That's what I'm
example,
saying.
they've been
Nobody's
telling us for
implementing
years
it.
to change the intro language to Python. It is currently
Yep.
Java, and we know that Python's here to stay. It is the standard, but
Yep.
who has changed it? Nobody over here.
Nobody. Nobody.
All of that. So yeah, we feel you, we see you, we understand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
And it's frustrating.
what can people hire you for? What kinds of things do you do to support academics?
So I do a grant proposal consultation. So I've actually worked with a couple of folks that were writing proposals for NSF. I actually do curriculum development. So I actually have some contracts where I've done some curriculum development. So building courses, building materials for courses. I do general kind of technology consulting. So I also do development. So I have a current research project where I'm working with a faculty member on building technology for their research project. So they have an NSF funded project and they needed some technology development done. And so I'm working on that, right? So, you know, all of the skills that I have,
We
right?
might have to talk offline about some stuff.
Listen, you know where to find me. Deidra.wells@gmail.com. Look. So yeah, no, so, you know, I have a lot of
go.
skills. I mean, I worked really hard, right? Like I worked really hard in every job I ever had. And I was thinking to myself, I'm
Right.
like,
And
you
these
know,
skills don't go away.
those skills do not go away. And I always thought there's so many places that I could, you know, I can help people, right? And so, yeah, so that's really what I've been focusing on is really, you know, learning how to be an entrepreneur. So I'm still in the process. I'm still learning. Shout out to my friend Michelle Hayward. So that's my my friend tour. I call her my friend tour, my friend mentor.
Yes.
That's
So
great.
I
yeah,
met her at NSBC. She's so nice.
yeah.
I love
Listen,
Michelle.
Michelle
We
is
communicate through memes.
Michelle is what's up. Michelle is what's up. And so yeah, right. So you know, she's been really helpful. She's been really helpful.
Are you still getting flued out? That's the question I want to know because you was talking about being flued
I
out.
wish I was
so
getting flued out.
Are you fluing
Girl,
yourself out?
I ain't never got flued out. You know, academia don't let you get flued out. Look, you gotta get on that level. If you get on that level y'all on, you get flued out. But nah, girl, I ain't getting flued out nowhere.
Oh my goodness.
I got flued out for them
I'm trying to
conferences.
get flew home. I've been out.
You've been out too
Trying to
much.
get
You want to
flued
get
home.
flued home?
Not home.
Look.
Get flew home.
She has.
That's how I go. That's how I go. Look, you know,
Sit down.
I'm not really trying to be getting flued out nowhere these days because you know COVID's still out here. Hopefully we'll be gone.
People be coughing with their whole mouth open.
Oh my
Girl.
God! Look, I'm still masking.
What is that?
Because I don't want, even
It's
though
gross.
COVID is not like
Same.
out here like it used to be. I don't want the flu. I don't want the cold. I don't want that stuff either. I don't want it either.
Exactly. That's not the only disease you can get.
Seasonal
from that.
allergies.
No. So
All of it.
Yeah, but you know, if you still mask gang, you know, I got a couple little side hustles. So I also have a
Oh, that's right.
yeah, I got
That's right.
a t-shirt. Well, I got a design because again, I'm still creative, right? So I actually have a apparel and business. So Thoughts for the Culture. So if you want to go grab you some t-shirts, I also got masks. Thoughts for the Culture. You can find it on Instagram. Or on Threadless. But yeah,
Do all of your plugs as we,
oh boy,
as we
all of
close
our-
out. You should do all your plugs. Yes.
all of my plugs. Yeah, no. So yeah, I am.
And where people can find you online and all that.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I got a couple different little aliases on Instagram. So my general Instagram, DJM Wells. I don't have any secrets, so my thing is public, even though I ain't really doing nothing on there but showing my wigs and my kid and my life. And I also have Thoughts for the Culture, so that's my retail site. If you are interested in my Lego situation, I do have a Lego Instagram, Brick Diva B-side. So that's where I usually post my pictures of my Lego city and all of my builds and my customs and stuff like that. Yeah, look, I'm actually gonna be
awesome.
I'm actually gonna be branching out, and I'm gonna be including some customs that I'm gonna be doing for sale. So I'm gonna be doing some HBCU inspired Lego stuff. So for all the Black Lego heads out there, I know there's not a lot of stuff out there, so I'm actually working on making more things for the culture, like for us, right? So some custom builds of some of our favorite TV shows like Martin and 227 and some of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so if you into Lego, you keep an eye on that. And then I will be starting a podcast. So I'm also doing a podcast with some friends. We are reading folks, and so we like to read, and so those book reading hoes are on Instagram, HEAUXS. So we'll be posting some podcasts. So if you like to read and you want to hear some Black women's perspectives on books and on anything that is literary related, I feel like literary is a little too elevated for how we're going to probably get down, but...
Are you reading Shakespeare?
Yeah, so one of my friends that is on the podcast, she's a journalist, and so she's a journalist by trading and by trade, and so she's like literary, and I was like, I don't know if we should use literary, but okay. But yeah, so we'll be a good time. I think if you enjoyed this, I think you'll really enjoy that. I think you'll really enjoy that. So yeah, so that's all my jazz. Yeah, so I try and make sure that I have all these opportunities for creativity in my life. I like to share my creativity with others. Being creative makes me happy. Being able to express life makes me happy. And we need more happiness in the world. Shout out to Black Joy, everybody. Absolutely. Go get you some because we need it. But yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, this was a lot of that.
Well, so look, I'm glad. Look, I'll be the joy pusher. That might be a new T-shirt, so you keep an eye out for that one. Black joy pusher. There we go.
The joy pusher. I love it.
So yeah, so I've had fun.
Here for it.
Y'all are fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was so good. I knew parts of your story, most of it. It was good to have all the linkages and hear everything and hear a perspective that we don't usually hear in computing.
I'm glad.
Or on this podcast.
Yeah, and one of those things that I feel like is really important is that, right, is that having to tell students, right? And I always like to share that story, and I like to share my story with the students when I would teach students and I work with students, because it's important for them to know that, there is not one way to get here, right? There's not one way to work in computing. Mm-hmm. And the more broadly that we talk about the experiences and the opportunities in computing, I think the more bang for our buck we're going to get, right? So, the digital divide is real, it's still there. We need people in all parts of the computing space, right? And so that's from education to actually technology development to research to just even being able to be advocates and proselytize about how important it is to have our perspectives be taken in technology, right? Being able to understand how people use technology from an actual perspective that's not a white gaze, right? Because it's right. At this point it's endemic. It's not necessarily even malicious or, at this point, this is the system. And so we have to be able to look past just kind of creating these kind of small channels to get people into computing, right? And ladies, please come join us. Please come join us, because we definitely need more ladies still. So please come join us.
Absolutely. So
we love you. We would love to have you in whatever capacity that you want to engage in technology. Welcome. What they do at the church at the end. It's like, welcome all to the altar. Welcome to the altar. Come on down.
The doors are open.
The doors are open. There you go. The doors are open.
The doors of the computer are open.
The doors of the computer science of technology are open to you. Join us if you will.
Will you come?
Will you come?
Okay, I'm gonna end this session
We have
now.
to sing "Come to Jesus."
Oh, see, you know what? Well, no, we don't want to alienate everybody. Look, everybody, everybody don't share faith now, so we don't want to alienate nobody.
Come to the hard drive just now.
Come to the heart. See?
Jeremy's through with this.
She is. She is. Listen, I'm mad.
I was waiting for one of you to say "come to the motherboard" because it
that's
felt
even
right,
better.
Come to the
but y'all
motherboard.
failed.
That's even better.
I love it.
That's
It's like a
even better.
mecca of sorts.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes.
Because it's
So
the
yeah.
mother.
But I've had so
Anyways.
much fun with y'all. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for chatting with us. And I know you
Yeah.
gotta go. So
Yes,
thank
I
you
have a
for
child that
giving
needs
us
to be
extra time to
retrieved.
cheat.
So it's been fun. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you so
And
much.
I'll see y'all
yes,
soon,
And I'm gonna
hopefully.
follow up with you on other stuff later.